Good morning and welcome to Optima Healthcare Insurance Services webinar, The Exhaustion of Caring, Recognize and Respond to Compassion Fatigue. I am Millie Mastramati, your program moderator today, and as always, your lines are muted, but you can chat in questions anytime and we will address them at the end. You'll also be able to ask questions live. I'll give you instructions at that time. Well, how our world has changed since we chose this topic back in the fall of 2019. Compassion fatigue in the pre-COVID-19 world was an important and timely topic, and it is even more relevant today. Our speaker, Patricia Smith, is a certified compassion fatigue specialist with 20 years of training experience. Patricia is the founder of the Compassion Fatigue Awareness Project. She writes, speaks, and facilitates workshops on the topic for caregivers nationally and internationally. You can watch Patricia on a TEDx talk entitled Navigating the Path to Wellness, Compassion, Fatigue, and Caregiving. And she has authored several books, including To Weep for a Stranger, Compassion, Fatigue, and Caregiving. Patricia, thanks so much for being with us today, and welcome.
Oh, well, excuse me. Thank you, Millie. I have a little bit of an allergy, so if I'm clearing my throat, that's all it is. I live up on an island in the San Juan Islands, 2 hours out of Seattle, and then an hour ferry ride. So we have a small island, and it is covered in yellow pollen everywhere, which is making everyone very nervous. But anyway, on to compassion fatigue. As Millie said, this was an important subject anyway, and now it's more important than ever. And I welcome you this morning, and I thank you for taking the time to learn more about this. If you already know about it, hopefully there'll be some new information. If you've never heard of it, there's going to be a lot of ahas, like, oh yes, I think that's what I have. It doesn't play favorites. It can be people on the front line, like healthcare workers, or it can be someone that sits at a desk in that environment. But as I said, it does not play favorites. Anyone is at risk for compassion fatigue who is in a helping profession. So as Millie said, happy to take questions. We can answer them at the end. I'll give you my email as well, patricia@compassionfatigue.org. If you have questions you want to ask, but not in this particular environment, I'm always happy to help you, particularly if you're doing research or want to know some new things. So let's get started. The exhaustion of caring, recognize and respond to compassion fatigue. This morning I'm going to give you a fair amount of information, and what I always ask, whether I'm at a conference or whatever, is just take a few deep breaths. This is all about you. It's something that you're not used to because you're probably a person who cares about others, maybe more often than you care about yourself. So this is all about you this morning. I want you to just take a deep breath and sit back and listen and take in as much information as you can and use it to the best of your ability to make your life healthier and a new level of wellness. So we're going to talk about what is compassion fatigue, on-the-job stresses and burnout, compassion fatigue in the workplace, how to manage it, and strategies to promote wellness. And then at the end, I'll give you some resources. A lot of the resources are my own, and I give you full permission to use them. I know this is being recorded. Go ahead and use it. I will give Millie this webinar, the PowerPoint, to put on her website or however she shares information with you. You don't have to ask me for any kind of permission. Just use it and share it with whomever you'd like. So why wellness? Why do we use the word wellness? This was written in the 4th century. Life is not merely to be alive, but to be well. To be healthy means we're free of disease, but to be well means that we are thriving, that we are producing, we are experiencing life to its fullest. We have a very, very high quality of life. So that's our goal here with tackling compassion fatigue, is we want to be well. Wellness is an active process of becoming aware of and making choices toward a healthy and fulfilling life. Wellness is more than being free from illness. It's a dynamic process of change and growth. So that's sort of the difference in why we're focusing on being well, and we're going to have to focus on it even more as time goes on and we hopefully get a good grip on this virus. And people who have high levels of compassion fatigue are probably going to suffer even higher levels. So we're going to have to talk a lot about recovery and things we can do to be free of the illness and change and grow. So there are 7 forms of human wellness. So becoming well is quite a task. We want to be physically well, emotionally, spiritually, socially, intellectually, environmentally, and occupationally. So you get to choose what area you'd like to work in first, and we'll talk more about that as we go on here. Dr. Charles Figley is the man who's known as sort of the father of compassion fatigue. He is now in New Orleans. He and his wife, Kat, who's also a psychologist, moved from Florida State University down to New Orleans after Katrina, and he's been there ever since. In 1995, he coined this definition of compassion fatigue. It's a state experienced by those helping people or animals in distress. It's an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped to the degree that it can create a secondary traumatic stress for the helper. He first learned about this when he was a psychologist, a young psychologist in the Vietnam War. As the wounded warriors came off the battlefield and into his tent, and he was there to help them and, to deal, he noticed that their stories of horror and battle were changing him. He started to question things about his own life, his morals, his values, his judgment, what he was doing with his life. And that's when he realized that their stories were affecting him and creating a secondary traumatic stress. So that's how this whole thing came about, and it's been his life's work. I've been very fortunate to have him as a mentor for the past 20 years. My background is actually journalism, so I've had to learn an awful lot, but with the mentoring of Dr. Figley, I've come to learn an awful lot about this thing called compassion fatigue. So it's a combination of physical, emotional, and spiritual depletion associated with the trauma related work we do, where people or animals are in significant emotional pain or physical distress. So, what are the symptoms? How do we know we have this? It's a very specific set of symptoms. First thing is you want to isolate. And why is that? Because you just feel like everybody wants something from you and you're totally depleted. So you find ways to isolate. If you're at work, you close your door too much. Maybe at lunch, you don't go in the coffee room. You just stay in your office. You just don't go out because you don't want people to approach you in any way. You might have an emotional outburst. And where does that come from? That comes from the fact that for many years, probably since childhood, since a lot of this develops in childhood, it's emotional outbursts and you just want to push down all of the pain that you're feeling. So you push it down and you push it down. And at some point, the human body in a certain situation just lets it all come out and you have an emotional outburst. You feel sadness and apathy. After a while, you're just apathetic to what you're doing, and this veil of sadness is on you all the time, and you don't understand because you have some good things happening in your life as well, but you feel sad and apathetic. You have an impulse to rescue anyone in need, and what that's about is personal boundaries. We never learned personal boundaries and how to protect ourselves, so we're out there always wanting to do everything, and we become totally depleted. The rhythm of a healthy caregiver is deplete, fill up. And you want to fill up every single day because you're depleting in the work you do. Persistent physical ailments. That's that scratchy throat. That's that back of the neck. That's the lower back. Gastrointestinal problems. Those are things that the body is telling you you need to stop what you're doing. It's hurting me, but we don't because we keep going and going and going. We feel we have unlimited resources and we can keep going because that's what helpers do. Substance abuse, we know this is a huge problem, particularly in our country. And why is that? Because we're self medicating to make ourselves feel better. We're eating too much, we're doing the computer too much, pornography, tobacco, alcohol, all of those things to make ourselves feel better. And I'm going to share with you how to counteract that if indeed that's what we're doing. And we all do it, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Hypervigilance, hyperarousal. And that's where I see that the most is in ER situations, firefighters, law enforcement, where they're always waiting for that bell to go off and the other shoe to drop. So your body is always in that state of hypervigilance, which is so very, harmful to our wellness. Recurring nightmares and flashbacks. You experience something, a traumatic event, and perhaps don't have the skills or coping skills in order to let it go and move forward. We just hold on to it, and what we get is the nightmares and the flashbacks. And I always tell, my people when I give any kind of a talk, if indeed this is happening to you, you probably need some professional help to help you get through it. It's very hard to overcome this by ourselves. And excessive complaints about colleagues, management, and those being helped. That's because it's all inside of us churning, and we want to get rid of it, so we put it out there. But as we'll learn as we go on, that's not the way to let the trauma go. It's to deal with it within. So, what are the causes? Why do some people get it and some people don't? The main reason is other directedness. We've learned somehow, probably early in our childhood, to put the needs of others before our own. So we're always out there looking for what we can do to help others, and it's causing us a lot of stress in our lives, and occasionally burnout, and certainly high levels of compassion fatigue. Providing service to others with stress and work-related trauma. And when I watch the news and I see these caregivers on the front line right now, and they're so upset and they're crying and talking about how hard they're working, I think this one is really about that, continuing to provide service to others with that kind of trauma inside. Lack of personal or professional coping skills. Perhaps there was traumatic events going on as we're growing up, alcoholism, physical abuse, mental abuse. We never learned personal and professional coping skills. But I can tell you that it's never too late to learn these skills in order to keep our compassion fatigue levels very low. We never, ever get rid of compassion fatigue. It's always within us. Those neural pathways are formed very, very early. So we have to learn some new skills to deal with it. Lack of personal boundaries. We'll talk more about that. If our personal boundaries are way, way out there, we need to bring them in. We have to decide what and who we want in our lives and try to get rid of dysfunctional relationships because they suck all the energy out of us, and that's energy we need for ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, we have nothing left to give others. Overdeveloped sense of responsibility. Again, this starts in early childhood when we've learned to take care of everyone else and we're overwhelmed. So we have an overdeveloped sense, thinking that we're responsible for the whole world. A practice of minimizing traumatic events, saying that we can handle it, and caregivers tend to do that. Um, and sometimes, we can't. We've reached our limits. And a history of unresolved childhood trauma, which are the ACEs, um, the adverse childhood experiences that we're hearing so much about. Our friend Sigmund Freud says the unexpressed emotions will never die. They're buried alive and they'll come forth later in uglier ways. We can push it down only to a certain extent. We push down, and then one day it will come out and we'll realize we have to do something about it, which is a good thing, actually. So, on the job stresses, a lot of this you know better than I do, but I go through it and I try to make it very, very simple. Have you look at it from a different standpoint, maybe reframe some of the things you're thinking. So, stress is about being anxious, it's about overload, it's too much work, too many projects, too many clients, too many patients, just too much. Then we go into burnout, and burnout is suddenly not enough. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough finances. We don't have enough direction. We just don't have enough. Post traumatic stress disorder is the primary stress disorder. It happens to someone. And we've learned a tremendous amount about post traumatic stress disorder in the last years due to the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars. We see our wounded warriors coming back with PTSD, and they're learning so much about it, which is wonderful because that it is so related to compassion fatigue that it helps all of us to understand more what's going on. And then we have secondary traumatic stress, which is a secondary stress disorder, and that is compassion fatigue. And the way I like to explain this is the primary stress happens to you. You're driving to work in the morning and you get into a fender bender. You drive to work, you find your best friend, and you're shaking and you're upset, and you say, "Oh my gosh, I just had a fender bender. Um, this is going to cause me a lot of trouble. It's going to cost me money. It's going to cost me time. I'm going to have to get a car because my car is going to have to go in the shop," and you feel it. That is all within you. A secondary traumatic stress happens to someone else. They tell you the story of the fender bender, and you relate it to your own fender bender. And so, as a you end up taking their stress and making it your own. And what we have to do is learn to listen without taking on someone else's stress. We just have to be present. And we'll talk more about mindfulness as time goes on here, because that's what we need to do. We have to be mindful, we have to be supportive, but we don't have to take on the pain and suffering of others as our own. So, how do we manage stress? Which is levels today are just everyone is stressed because of the situation. We have to identify our source of stress. It can't be just free floating stress, it has to be named, because once we name something, we can do something about it. So you want to look at that and say, okay, well, my source of stress is the virus, but that's way too broad. What we have to say is the source of my stress is staying indoors all day. I'm really having a problem staying in place. Well, maybe your answer to that would be, get outside and take a walk. Wear your face mask, but get outside and take a walk. So we have to identify the source of stress and do something about it. Educate yourself about the effects of stress on your body, mind, and spirit. We're doing that this morning, so that's a good thing. Identify those unhealthy coping methods and adopt some healthy coping mechanisms. It's replacing something that maybe isn't so healthy with something that is healthy. And that's, again, a process, learning how to do that. Tighten those personal boundaries. Where can you let go of something that you know is causing you a lot of stress? And unfortunately, oftentimes it's a person. Um, and that's a lot more involved, but it is possible to tighten those personal boundaries and practice empathic discernment. And what is empathic discernment? That's knowing when it's hurting. And helpers have this issue in that they'll keep taking on more and more and more. And we have to get to know ourselves and get to know, what is it when is it, you grab for something to eat when you're stressed? Is it you start hyperventilating? Find out what it is that's your signal that you're taking on too much and then back away from it. It's okay to say to someone, I really can't deal with this right now. I need a few minutes for myself. Go take a walk, do something, and get yourself back to your baseline so that you know that you can handle something. So, organizational compassion fatigue. What is that? It's very simple. When the high percentage of your staff exhibit elevated levels of compassion fatigue, the organization itself becomes compassion fatigue. It becomes very dysfunctional. The processes and procedures keep the organ focused, productive, and healthy suddenly disappear, and you're no longer producing at a good rate. So, what are some of the symptoms of that? High absenteeism, which is a real problem. Harvard did a study not long ago to ask American workers what causes them the most stress. And the thing that causes American workers the most stress is being asked to do something that they're not trained to do. If you're a person that has high levels of compassion fatigue and you're on your third day of having that low brain migraine headache and you just can't go into work, someone else has to do your job. And if you're the first person to work in the door, your supervisor says you have to do Joan's job today, and you say, I don't know how to do that. That isn't what I'm trained to do. And she says, you'll figure it out. It's in that figuring out that causes you high stress. So high absenteeism is a problem. Elevated rate of workers' comp claims. And I talk about that because people they're not mindful. And so they have a lot of accidents at work. And I really stress that when I talk to CEOs and directors and presidents of organizations, particularly healthcare organizations. That's going to take from your bottom line, and that's a real problem. So elevated rate of workers' comp claims, a lack of flexibility. Everyone has to be flexible these days. Things are changing practically minute by minute these days, so we have to be flexible and move with change. A tendency to break rules. Oftentimes we find people that think they know better than what the rules are. And we can't do that. We need to follow the rules. A them versus us mentality. That's that other directed thing. Everything is out there. All the blame is out there. All the problems are out there. So us versus them. And that can be anything. That can be staff versus leadership. It can be leadership versus staff. It could be staff versus volunteers. I mean, it goes on and on. How we set up them versus us mentalities. Strong reluctance to change. Uh, it's very hard at times like this to change. We want to, dig our heels in because every day things are changing. but unfortunately, that causes us a lot of stress. A lack of vision for the future. We have to hope that things are going to get better. And when we have high rates of compassion fatigue and burnout and stress, we don't see a future. And undermining the mission of your organization, which is so very important. Your mission statement reads: the company's mission is to make a positive difference in healthcare by providing high quality account, risk, and claims management services to reduce healthcare professional and general liability costs and insurance premiums. The company maintains a visible distinction of integrity and quality and differentiates itself through its culture, ownership, and results, which is your core. That is so very, very important. And if there's anyone in HR on the call, or you know someone in HR, it's very important that when you hire new people, you want to ask them if their personal values and morals align with the values of the company. And if they say, well, I've never read the mission statement, I don't know what it is, hand them a copy of it, let them look at it, and then discuss with you. Because what will happen if their values don't align with the company's values, they're going to try to change the company. Instead of focusing on the job you've hired them to do, they're going to try to change it to meet their own needs. So you definitely want to talk about your mission statement. And yours is wonderful. I read tons and tons of mission statements, and it's very clear what you're doing. Um, and I like the visible distinction of integrity and quality. Excellent. I would print that out and keep it nearby to remind you who you are. Your mission statement is your branding. It's your branding and telling people who you are. And it's very important that you follow that, because as soon as you don't, people are going to start to come after you and say, but you say you do this and you don't. So you definitely want to keep your mission statement in the forefront and make sure everyone is on board with that. Okay, so compassion fatigue itself. Personal strategies. This is for the individual as opposed to the company. You want to create balance between work, relationships, and me time. Well, what I'm hearing from everybody is there's lots of me time and time for relationships, which is wonderful. People are texting and Skyping and emailing and Zooming all over the place, which is just incredible. I know a lot of women, particularly who miss their grandchildren. That seems to be a real theme. And I know I have to admit I have the same problem. I have a 1 year old niece, and she actually lives across the street, but we have decided to maintain our separate residences right now. So I see her through the window, and I see her on FaceTime, and it's very, very difficult. But we do need to balance work, relationships, and me time. If indeed you are working from home, I know it can be very, very difficult right now. One of the things that everyone is saying is they have a lack of concentration. Um, I have a lot of my sister is works in the school district. My daughter-in-law works in the school district, and they're working 9 to 5, teaching online and getting things ready, hopefully for the next school year. And sometimes they can only do it for 1 or 2 hours because they said their concentration just doesn't work. So find a balance. Maybe set up some sort of a schedule. I'm going to work for 2 hours every morning, then I'm going to go for a walk, and then I'm going to email my mother, and then try to do that and stick to it. And it isn't easy, but we all need to try to do what's best. Build that healthy support system. Contact the people who support you. Um, People that are not dysfunctional in any way, that are naysayers. We need positivity right now. We need to be realistic about what we're dealing with, but we also have to be positive. Practice authentic, sustainable self care daily, not twice a week when you go to the gym, but every single day. Authentic, something that is authentic to you. Myself, it's reading, writing, working out in my garden right now because that's what fills me up. You can't do what other people tell you to do. You have to do what's authentic to you, and it needs to be sustainable. This can go on for quite a while, and we have to do things that will sustain us throughout each day. Um, Writer Annie Dillard said, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And right now, we're going to look back on this someday and say, that's how I spent my days, and that's how I spent my life during those dark times. Practice mindfulness. We'll talk more about that. Strengthen resiliency, coping skills. Practice vulnerability. Strengthen your relationship to nature. Nature heals. Create a self care plan. learn about psychological first aid, and lower your levels with higher levels of compassion satisfaction. And we'll talk about each one of those things coming up. So, what is mindfulness? It's the quality or state of being mindful, the practice of maintaining a non judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment to moment basis. Basically, what it's saying is experience every single moment of what you're dealing with right now. Just stay in the moment. If you're walking, pay attention to walking. If you're gardening, pay attention to the dirt and the plants and the water. Pay attention to all of that. Don't let your mind wander because that's actually when accidents happen. So stay in the moment and be mindful of what you're doing at that very time. This is why the dog is happier. The little dog is just thinking about how happy he is, just sitting next to his best friend. And the man, well, he's thinking about his car needs repairs. He has to take that trip next week. His house payment is due. His money is low in the bank. He's thinking about everything else. He's not being mindful. Beware of sliming and slimers. This is actually a term that psychologists use. When helpers hear and see difficult things in the course of their work, the most normal reaction in the world is to want to debrief with someone to alleviate a little bit of the burden that they're carrying, because we carry it within. And if we haven't learned to carry it well, it's very uncomfortable. We feel it inside and it's always nagging at us. It's healthy to turn to others for support and validation. The problem is that we're often not doing it properly. The problem is also that colleagues don't always ask us for permission before debriefing their stories with us. So you don't want to be around someone who just pours out all the horrors of the details of something that happened to them because it's not only re traumatizing them, it's traumatizing you. And it's okay to say, stop. Please don't tell me this story right now. I really can't handle it. Tell me how you were feeling. How did it make you feel? Because when people talk about their feelings, then we can relate and we can support them better than if they're giving us horrible details that we're trying not to listen, and it causes us higher levels of compassion fatigue. Resiliency, be optimistic. Again, you don't want to be a Pollyanna during these times, but you want to believe that there is a good future for all of us. Be flexible. Identify positive role models. Find someone that is handling things well and watch them and say, I can do that too, because we can. We can all do it. Use your intelligence. Think about things. Face your fears. Find meaning in difficult times. Manage that change and identify that core value system. What's important to you? Uh, this is something I believe firmly in. I moved up here to the San Juan Islands from the San Francisco Bay Area. You talk about culture shock. Because I needed to be closer to nature. I just knew that about my life. I wanted to be, where the orcas are and the bald eagles fly overhead. And I really, really needed that. And since I've been here for 5 years, it's made a huge difference in my life. Rachel Carson once said, those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. And I find that to be true. Even if it's just going for a walk in a nearby park, get out among the trees and the flowers and the fresh air and the sky and the stars. It's really a way to strengthen your resiliency. Another thought, Alice Trebek, I guess he does a game show. If you can't be in awe of Mother Nature, then there's something wrong with you. I thought that was kind of cute. So, you want to take the professional quality of life self test. This is free to all of you. It's on my website. It's called the ProQual, PROQAL self test, and it's the life's work of Dr. Beth Hudnall Stam, who has also been a mentor to me. It talks about compassion satisfaction, which is the good stuff in our lives, and it talks about compassion fatigue. It gives you your burnout scale and your secondary trauma scale, which is compassion fatigue, and it gives you your scores. So take it as often as you want. It's free. She's opened it up to, gosh, I don't know, I think 10 different languages. Just download it, share it with, your colleagues. People often ask me, they'll say, well, I know I have levels of this, high levels of it, but we have someone in our office who has dysfunctionally high levels. What can we do to help? My one suggestion is you don't go to someone and, number one, we never diagnose each other. But you can just go up to the person and say, gee, I took this test and I found it very interesting. I thought maybe everyone in the office could take it and see if indeed we do have high levels of compassion fatigue in our office. And hopefully that person will take it and find out that he or she might have some levels that can be lowered by higher levels of compassion satisfaction. So, what is compassion satisfaction? It's simply the pleasure we derive from doing the caregiving work we do. Higher levels of compassion satisfaction lead to becoming healthier and more effective caregivers, and it really adds to our wellness by having high levels of compassion satisfaction. So, what does it look like? Gosh, I've heard people say, I have people raise their hand. What makes you happy about being at work? And some say, well, it's just the environment. We have a new office and it has great big windows and it's just a beautiful place to work. Other people, one woman raised her hand and she was very anxious to talk, and she says, well, she said, we wear suits all week, and she says, but on Friday we have dress down Friday, and she said, I always look forward to Friday. One said, on Monday mornings we have breakfast. The company provides breakfast when we get in, and that's definitely something that lifts my compassion satisfaction to go into work and have such a kindness for all of us. People that work with animals, of course, they say it's working directly with the animals. Here's some ideas. They may be related to creating a positive experience for those you serve. Working with dedicated colleagues, that's huge. I know a lot of people that aren't really fond of their job, but they love the people they work with. And every day they go in there and they produce with people that they really respect and enjoy working with. Working as an effective team, there's nothing better than a team coming together for a project and then successfully completing that project. Supervising and directing positive outcomes, and developing high levels of workplace satisfaction. So think about what it is that keeps you coming back to your job. And what provides compassion satisfaction? Because the more you think about that and the more you involve yourself in that and be thankful for it and grateful, the lower your compassion fatigue will be. So create a self-care plan for yourself. I used to always hear from people, I don't have time to do that. Well, now we've all got the time, don't we? So create some sort of a plan that you can carry over. So when you do go back to work, or you're, back to what will be our new normal, you'll have that self-care plan in place and you'll continue to use it. So start with one measurable, accountable goal. And what we use here is the DOT theory, the do one thing. Studies show that if indeed we do one thing and try to change that, our success rate is about 93% of succeeding. If we indeed put two or three things down, our success rate drops to about 53%. We think we're such wonderful multitaskers, and when the truth be known, we really aren't. Our brain just wants to do one thing at a time. So, an example of this is I'll go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 45 minutes. So, for 2 weeks, you try to fulfill that. And this is where self compassion comes in. Maybe you were a little bit overzealous about Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you say, okay, it's a little bit too much. I'll go to the gym on Monday and Friday. So you try that, then you look at it again and you say, 45 minutes, that's too much of a chunk. I'm going to do it for 30 minutes. So you narrow it down to, I will go to the gym Monday and Friday for 30 minutes. That's better than nothing, and it's something that you can succeed at and feel good about, and maybe eventually you can add to that. So we have to hold ourselves accountable and measurable. Otherwise, a self-care plan doesn't work. Psychological first aid. I don't know if any of you know about this, but I took a certification online through the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is being quoted on TV all the time now. They're certainly the experts. And it's a evidence-informed approach to providing support to survivors following a serious crisis event. And what I found, it's mostly just being mindful and being there for the other person. It's bearing witness to the horror, the trauma that they're feeling due to an event. And it's been shown to be the best indicator of human resiliency following a traumatic event. So I highly recommend, I think it was like $49, and I think there were 6 sessions, I can't remember. But you just Google it, or it's www.jhsph.edu. And it might be something you want to take. It's really a good thing to have. So these are some of the on-the-spot self-care practices that people have told me about. I know these things work because over the 20 years, I have people who have gone to conferences and heard me speak or read my books or used my training manuals, and they tell me that these things work, and that's why I'm sharing them with you. I don't just pull them out of the air, they do work. Breathing deeply. I don't think there's anything better than deep, deep breaths to center ourselves and allow us to deal with the problem or whatever at hand. Very deep breaths, and it works. It's nature's way of calming us and helping us to focus and do some good work. Laugh, humor is always huge. Um, Even dark humor at these times. Make sure it's someone who understands it's dark humor, but laughing is really a good thing. Gosh, there's been some funny things, funny pictures and on Facebook and different places. Worth a laugh. Journaling. What this does, it takes everything, all the thoughts and feelings and emotions that you've got inside of you, and it puts them outside on paper. Um, there's The Art of Writing, Julia Cameron. She has what she calls the morning pages. You take three 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, and first thing when you get up in the morning, you just write stream of consciousness. I did this for 3 years, so I know it works, and it takes everything that's inside of you and it puts it outside, and it helps you to let go of some of the trauma and the stress and the pain and suffering that you might be feeling. So, journaling is a very, very important part of wellness. Take a brisk walk. There's nothing better than to get outside and see there's a big world out there. Things will get better. Stretch, good for the body. Talk to a trusted friend. Eat a nutritious snack. Practice letting go rituals. And these can be anything you want them. You can create them yourself. I've had people tell me some that are just wonderful. They're very creative. A social worker, and I love social workers, especially the young ones, are so idealistic and wonderful. And this one was saying that she got home later than her husband, and he was always at the door tapping his foot. He had their two children hanging on to him, and the dog was barking. And she said if she didn't figure out something to do to help her let go of her day's work, that she was going to have problems in her marriage. So she decided what she would do is every day she would take her car when she got home and she'd drive it into the driveway. She went around the corner where the garbage can is. She opened the lid of the garbage can and she stood there for a couple of minutes and unloaded the day into the garbage can. And then she just put the lid on and walked in and she was 100% present for her family. So this is the kind of thing people are doing. When I lived over on the coast, I worked in elder care, and I would go, and it was rough. Elder care is difficult work. You lose just about everybody. And I remember some days were really difficult, and I would go down to the ocean, to the seashore, and I would find a stick, and I would write a word. Being a writer, words are what sustain me. I find a word that kind of told me what the day was about, and I would write it in the sand, and then I would stand back and I would just let the water take the sand away. And that was my letting go ritual. So it can be anything. It can be something in your environment that reminds you, a trigger. Um, Once I spoke at the Guide Dog for the Blind over in, excuse me, San Rafael, California. And one woman said she has a 14-year-old daughter. She said, I'm a single mom. And she said, sometimes when I go home, I really have a heavy heart and I'm not present for my daughter. And I realized I needed to do something about it. She said, so the funny thing is, I only live 10 minutes from work. And she said, there's two stop signs. She said, the first stop sign is a regular sized one. And she says, I stopped. But the second stop sign, she said, I don't know why they put it there, but it's probably 3 times bigger than the usual stop sign. And she says, when I look up at it, it reminds me to stop. And she says, I do. I stop thinking about work. I go home and I'm 100% present for my daughter. So those are letting go rituals that you can use. And they can be creative, they can be your own, and you'll find that they actually work. Meditate, pray, whatever it is you do to be quiet and get yourself centered. It doesn't matter what it is, just do it and do more of it these days. Read a favorite quote or your mission statement. Listen to music. Studies show us that music is actually changing our brains, and there's probably nothing better. Keep some earbuds close by, and if something is bothering you, put on your favorite kind of music, whether it's, um, Bohemian Rhapsody or Beethoven. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be, very specific to you, but it will lift your spirits and help you to move forward. And create a coping ritual, and that can be like a letting go ritual. So, 6 steps to healthy caregiving and wellness. Build your resiliency. Figure out a way to build that resiliency. You did it before, you can do it again. Cultivate your compassion. If your compassion is waning, what will cultivate it? With me, it's looking in the eyes of a dog, petting a dog, hugging a dog, and my compassion just surges forward again. Improve those coping skills. Find out what it is you need, whether it's time management, decision making, financial skills, communication skills. Figure out where you could do better to cope and then find out more about it. And my goodness, you can go online and find an online course for just about anything. And I've done a lot of them, and I find them all good. I get something out of every single one of them. So I highly recommend going online, particularly since we have time now. Support your colleagues. This one is so very important. If you see someone that you're working with do something that you really respect and admire, go tell them. We need to be kind to each other. Let them know they're doing a good job. Just because people are walking around and it looks like they're handling things, they may not be. Embrace your self confidence. You're doing a tremendous job. The work you do is imperative to our world, and thank you for doing it. So be self confident in the work you do. You have reason to be. Manage change, so very important. Um, Learn to be a first responder to change. Say, okay, I'm not fond of change, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see if it's better. And psychologists tell us there are 3 kinds of humans when it comes to change. The first is the first adopter, says, yes, let's do it. I'm on board. What can I do to help? The next one is the group is the doubting Thomases. And those are the ones that say, we've done this before. I don't believe it's going to work. It's got too many holes in it. I'll wait and see. It's the wait and see attitude. And the last one is the one who dig their feet into the ground and say, I'm not going to change. So you want to be the first person. You want to change and move with the times, and it will make your life easier, less stressful, and you'll come out with high levels of wellness. So I'm going to leave you with 10 words. Trauma, that's the emotional reaction following a difficult event. Empathy. As caregivers, we're empathetic and compassionate people. As empathetic people, we open our hearts to the pain and suffering of others. As compassionate people, upon seeing the suffering, we're moved to act. And that's why we're caregivers. We want to alleviate some of that pain and suffering. So those are compassionate people that move to act. Compassion fatigue is a secondary traumatic stress. Compassion satisfaction is the pleasure we derive from the work we do. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back after a traumatic event. Authenticity is finding your true north, the real you. What you're doing these days needs to be authentic to you, not what someone tells you to do, but what's authentic to you. Sustainability, those are the behaviors and actions that carry us through this kind of thing we're going through right now. Vulnerability is being fully open to a wide range of emotions. And that's the work of Dr. Brene Brown. If any of you are familiar with her, you know how incredible she is. She has, I think, the most popular, most watched TED Talk. Um, watch it if you've got time, definitely, on vulnerability. And healthy caregiving, and that's the ability to be fully present in the moment. You want to be present to those that come to you for help. So I end up with a little thing that is so very important anytime, but is very important right now, and that's about kindness. We need to be kinder to each other. This is from Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite authors. He says, hello, babies. Welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded. At the outside, babies, you've got about 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of, babies. You've got to be kind. This is what kindness doesn't look like. The beatings will continue until morale improves. This is what it does look like. This is a little dress shop in downtown of Friday Harbor where I live. And I always love this little sign. It says, come in, don't put your coffee down. Please touch everything. Yes, your dog is welcome too. When I see a sign outside that says, no coffee allowed, don't touch anything, keep your children quiet, I don't go in there. That doesn't feel very kind to me. It isn't a place I want to be. And this, we have beautiful weddings out at a marina. And one day I was walking and I saw this. Today, 2 families become one. We ask that you please pick a seat, not a side. And this is what kindness looks like. We always laugh at this because we're not sure that little boy is that happy to share his ice cream, but he is. I admire people who barely have anything but share it nevertheless. I wanted to share one thing, I'm going to be back next month doing a recovery. Um, Millie named it beautifully, planting the seeds of the post-pandemic uh, uh, recovery. And I just think that it's so important to talk about post-traumatic growth, which I'll talk more about next month. But Dr. Figley came up with some things that will help if we start thinking of these things now. And like I said, we'll talk more about this in the future. But here's some things that he suggested: different qualities of healthy systems that foster resilience. This is for organizations. Acknowledgement and definition of the problem. Start figuring out what is the problem. Why do we have high levels of compassion fatigue? Commitment to the system, the family, or the organization as a whole. Orientation towards solutions rather than problems. Let's start thinking of solutions. How are we going to get back to our new normal? High tolerance for differences in others. That one is so important. Frequent expressions of concern and affection. Open and effective communication. And then these are some things that he recommends for individuals to do. More self-knowledge and insight. Take some of this quiet time to figure out some things that you didn't have time to do before. Having a sense of hope, healthy coping skills, strong functional relationships, personal perspective, and meaning. Those are just some things to think about for the future, that we can start working on now, because we're going to need it. We're going to need all the strength and resiliency we have to get through the next few years. So these are some resources. As I said before, some of them are mine. You're welcome to use them. You don't have to ask permission. Just give the Compassion Fatigue Awareness Project the credit for them. www.compassionfatigue.org is a website that my son built 20 years ago. You can take anything off of that. Healthycaregiving.com, that's where some of my books are, and there's some free downloads. I wrote the Caregiving Bill of Rights. It's free. You can download that. You have rights. Facebook, several years ago, my daughter said, "You need a Facebook post." I said, "Oh, no, not another thing." And she said, "No, really." Anyway, it's fun. People post all kinds of things. I post quotes and articles and things, and take a look. There might be something there that helps you out. The TEDx San Juan Island TED Talk, it's about 18 minutes long. I've heard that people are using it for training tool. They'll watch it and then they discuss some of the things that it opened up for them, like, "Oh yeah, we've got this," and it opens dialogue, and it's free, so please go use it. Greater Good Berkeley, UC Berkeley, over in Berkeley, California. That's a science of mindfulness. They have all kinds of great articles and things to help with wellness, particularly for healthcare workers. Dr. Brene Brown, she's the one who talks so much about vulnerability and everything else that's good. Dr. Judith Orloff talks about emotional vampires and people that take your energy and how to deal with them, because you need to keep your energy for yourself. And if indeed you're interested in taking a certification course to learn more about compassion fatigue and how to deal with it, maybe train in your organization, you can go to thegreencross.org, which is a training site that Dr. Figley and his wife started years and years ago. So with that, I think that that's probably it. Millie, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
Okay.
So we can open it up for questions right now. If you want to ask a question, you can unmute your line by pressing #6, or you can chat in a question.
Okay. And if not, if you don't,
and while you're thinking,
I was going to say, Millie, if they don't feel comfortable asking a question, which is often the case, or I just gave you an awful lot to process, if you're just not ready to ask a question, please contact me personally. I will be happy to lead you in the right direction and get you the expert advice you need, or whatever. Patricia at compassionfatigue.org.
Okay. The other site, I'll do this, Patricia. I'm putting it in the at compassion.
Yeah,
.org. I put it in the
it.
chat box there. And the other site that I was wondering about was you had mentioned the professional quality of life
Yes,
test.
yes.
I'd like to put that in the
Oh, I'm
chat box
sorry. I'm
too.
sorry that isn't on here. I somehow deleted it. It's always on there. It's one of the best things you can do for yourself. ProQual, PROWWPROQOL.org. Professional Quality of Life Self-Test.
QOL or QAL?
QOL. ProQual.
Oh,
Right,
.org.
yeah, .org. Type it out and let me see if I've got it right.
There you go. How's that?
No, that's not it. It's PROQOL.
Oh,
No U. ProQual. And there's all kinds of information on that.
okay.
All kinds of information. If you're really into all of that and have a
There you
background.
go. Sorry.
You know what? I hate to say it, but ProQual.
Okay, good. And I see Regina's typing a question right now. I was thinking of, when I worked in ICU under some really stressful situations, nothing like COVID, but, and then, you had talked about some coping mechanisms, and, I'm thinking of what caregivers can do when they can't leave their situation. They can't take a walk. They can't, when you're in the heat of the emergency department or the intensive care, or any time when you're at work and you can't walk out. I know you can breathe and maybe do a letting go ritual, or to have something like that you've developed in your head. Are there any other skills that that people can develop and practice when they can't get out of? They have to stay there and take care of patients.
Definitely, and I understand this. I worked for 10 years in healthcare, and I know, particularly nurses, they don't have time to breathe, let alone go out for a walk. What a lot of organizations have done is they have devised a buddy system where you have a buddy that will cover for you for 5, 10 minutes. Sometimes you don't need any more than 5 or 10 minutes just to get yourself back, collect yourself again. Go to your buddy and say, I need to go outside and walk around the parking lot, or if you have a nicer environment, for a few minutes, can you cover for me real quick? And undoubtedly, someone will be there that will help you. Definitely. And the other thing, of course, some places have a place where you can go. A couple of healthcare systems I worked with didn't even have a place other than the restroom, the ladies' restroom or the men's restroom to go to kind of wash, splash some water on your face or something. And what they did is this one, particularly in Florida, I remember they made a linen closet into a place where you could go and made it really nice, and had nice music you could turn on just to center yourself. So there's things that you can do as a group, but you have to come up with what works in your environment. I can give some suggestions, but really you have to figure out what works for you and your group. Did you do anything that helped you at that time?
Oh no, I was completely dysfunctional.
It's all right.
I used a lot of I used a lot of sarcasm.
Yeah.
But
Dark
anyway,
humor is great.
Yeah. Regina has a question though. She says, "What advice do you have to people who say they don't have time to focus on their own fatigue, due to work or family pressures?"
Well, that's one of the biggest things. I don't have time. Well, right now we do have time, although some are working through the day off site and still going home at night and take care of their families, so they don't have the time. I think that there's for a lot of you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can give out this information if you're a supervisor or a director or a manager. You can have a meeting, your weekly staff meeting, if they're still having those, which I doubt. But when things get back to a better normal, do the ProQual test as part of the meeting. Talk about compassion fatigue. Um, I hear it all the time. I don't have time to focus on my own. You've got to figure out a way to find time. This is your health, this is your wellness. And it's not only going to affect you, it's going to affect others. And compassion fatigue, high levels of compassion fatigue holds the power to completely stop a life. I mean, it really can, where you're on the couch or in bed and you can't move. There are people who have been in that situation. You don't want to get to the point where that's where you are and have to come up from the bottom. You want to catch it beforehand. So I guess maybe if someone said, I don't have time, I don't know what to do about it, I'd say, is there one small change you can make each day? And I would think, I always tell this story because it's one of my favorites. Um, I do compassion fatigue talks here for the animal protection, for hospice, for different groups here on the island. And after one for the animal group, the veterinarian on the island said, "Next steps, what do we do next?" And I thought, well, that's great. They want to do something more. I said, well, I'm happy to run a round table. And for anybody who wants to come, we'll open it up to the whole community. And people can come and we can talk about this. There's only one rule, and that's that it can't be negative. I want people to come and say what they are doing, to help others. So anyway, we had our first roundtable, and the veterinarian came in, and she was, she's got her practice, she's got her family, the whole thing. And she came in late, and she was all up in the air, and she's, I'm sorry I'm late. And so we talked about it, and when it was her turn, I said, well, what would you do? What change would you make in your everyday life that might help? And she said, I would ride my horse. I can't ride my horse anymore, and I find that that's a problem. And I said, well, what can you do to change that? And she said, I don't know. I said, can you get up a little earlier? She said, I get up early enough. And I said, can you get up a little earlier? She said, okay, I'm going to try to get up earlier and ride my horse. Long story short, she came back the next week, and she's like a different person. She said, I get up an hour earlier. It's quite possible. It's okay. It works. I ride my horse, and it has made all the difference in the world. Then the next week she comes, and she's got all these lovely pictures she's showing us on her iPhone. And she says, now, because I'm up so early, I see the sunrise. And she has all these beautiful pictures. So she's taking pictures of our beautiful surroundings on her horse every morning. And this is filling her up. And it has made a difference in her life. I've run into her. She said, that one thing made a difference in my life. But she probably needed someone to suggest that to her. She couldn't figure it out herself. So, I would go to the person if they asked me and said, I don't have time. I'd say, what is it one thing you can do? Find out if that's the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
We have another question came in. It's, what would you recommend if you see this in others, compassion fatigue in others, but they don't see it?
I don't think there's a presentation I've done in 20 years that someone doesn't ask this question. And the reason is because that person is so disruptive and they bring so much dysfunction to the organization and to the group. And the answer to that is you never go up to the person and say, I think you have high levels of compassion fatigue. That is just a terrible thing to do to someone. You bring them in, you include them. You include them. If everybody's in there getting a cup of coffee or you're eating lunch together or you're in a staff meeting, you bring up the pro-qual, you bring up compassion fatigue, you bring up the website, you bring up something that hopefully that person will have a glitch of, that sounds interesting. Maybe I better do that. More than anything, you need to support that person. Believe me, he or she is suffering terribly. And oftentimes, the level of suffering is in direct relation, direct proportion to how well they look like they're handling it. They might be happy with a smile on their face and doing their job, but inside they are absolutely dying because their life is so dysfunctional and there's so much pain and suffering that has not been resolved over the years. And that's what you have to do. You have to go back and figure some things out and then let it go. There's no other way to do it. There's literally no other way to do it. I mean, I think if you go to a professional, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor, they have different things. They have the rapid eye movement. They have all kinds of things like that. But this is, my work is for everyday people who need to bring the quality of their lives up. It's not for people with severe, um, post-traumatic stress or anything like that. You really need professional help if you're finding that you're not functioning well. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I see that it's 10:59 and we don't have any more questions right now. So again, I just would like to repeat what Patricia said, that if you do think of a question, feel free to either email me or Patricia at her at the Patricia at compassionfatigue.org. And she did mention that next month's webinar will be on May 21st. Planting the seeds for post-pandemic caregiver recovery is our topic.
Which is
and
great.
Just watch for that announcement. I'll be sending that out.
And Millie came up with that wonderful
Beg
title.
your pardon?
I said, and you came up with that wonderful title.
Oh.
Because, well, the words are so important to me. And what it is it's planting the seeds. You know, a lot of us aren't going to have the strength and the energy to do what we're going to have to do right now. We just don't. But we can plant some seeds. And that's so important. You know, if it's in there, eventually it'll come out and we'll do what we have to do. So thank you for that. And I look forward to being back. And again, thank you to all of you who are taking the time to do this.
Okay, and with that, I will close the meeting out. Thanks everybody for joining us. When I close the meeting, you'll be sent directly to the online webinar evaluation. And everybody have a great day. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Be well.
Bye.